Okay, so basically, hopefully you can hear this in the video. Anyway, as Grasshopper, no? So the question is, how do we do it? And I think it's as simple, as far as I can imagine, that project is 2 lines, okay? We divide each of the lines by a number of points, and we connect the point of one with the point of another one. This is how I see it, more or less. We're gonna try. I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but it's always worth trying. Grasshopper is a little tool that comes in Rhino with this little green button with the head of a grasshopper there, and you will open a little green plugin, which is a software within Rhino. We close this window. Normally what I put is this Grasshopper window on the side corresponding layer management or the properties. Different people do it different ways, but you can have it also in another window if you have 2 screens. Okay. So there are some green things here. You might have them, might not, don't worry. What we're gonna do is double click on this gray area or the brown, and we're gonna click on geometry, for example. Everything turns off, and what we see by scrolling in and out with the scroll button of the mouse, you need the mouse, I think it's useful. We can see what we created. To insert commands in Grasshopper is by double clicking and type in whatever you want to do. It's a little like Rhino in that sense. So for example, if you want to do sphere, you type sphere and it gives you different options. I can do a sphere. You can move those commands and you can see what happens in Rhino. In Rhino, what it does is a sphere as well. Okay, when I deselect things on Grasshopper, things are deselected and therefore red in Rhino. When I select the tool in Grasshopper, it turns green in Grasshopper and green in Rhino. When you want to create something you can touch in Rhino, because everything is just a ghost, I can't select it. You need to bake it, which is right click on the middle of the tool and bake. When you bake something, you can select the layer you want to bake it on, say okay, and then you get your thing. You can bake it as many times as you want. You can delete by selecting them and delete, and it will be deleted. That ghost from Rhino as well. There's a way also of bringing geometry from Rhino. For example, if I create a line and I click 2 times, I create this line here, that's in Rhino, but I could bring it into Grasshopper by creating this geometry. Again, double click geometry tool, right click, set one geometry and selecting the line. That's the way they start communicating. When I select now geometry, this one turns green. When I deselect it, it turns pretty much like Rhino. I could do another one, line, and I could copy the Grasshopper tools by saying Control-C and Control-V, right-click one geometry, and select the other one. So now I have one of the lines here, another one here. I think this is the basis of those projects as far as I can. What we need to do is divide each line. There's a command in Grasshopper, like in Rhino, it is divide. No, there's no divide domain. There are many types of divides, but you can divide curve. You can divide by length, by the way, but let's divide curve and see what happens. Like any Grasshopper tool, has some input and output. If you don't know what the input is, you just step on top and stay on each of the input letter and read. Curve to divide. Now remember, Rhino, it's just curve is everything, lines, polylines. So we can place that as an input. But already we see a number of points dividing that line. How many points is the other input? It says 10. If you want to change the number of points, we can insert a slider, for example. which is not the first one, the second one here. Sliders allow you to change the points. No? So what I'm going to do is try to use a slider that is good for me. I'm going to double click on slider, and I'm going to put n is integers, which is not 0.1 but 1, 2, 3, and I can set the maximum to whatever, 100 starting point. So I can slide from 0 to 100, and that could be the n. So now this has 69. Copy the divide and paste. I can plug in the other line. Now it also has the same number of points. And now we can do lines. Lines between all of these points, P's, and all of these points. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So that's that is a number of lines between points. It's very simple, but many of them, instead of having to do, if there are too many, I can reduce the number of points or increment. Lines don't have thickness, so we might need to do a pipe. No? So if we do piping, you have variable pipes or just simple pipes. Pipes expect curves, so I can introduce those curves. These are obviously very big, so the radius should be relatively small, which is, we can put a slider to control the radius. Still very big, so I'm going to take it down. I could even double click and say that the maximum is 0.1. Say okay, and take that lower. So now we have the threads materialized, because before the lines, you can assign materials to those, but to this, yes, no? So it's a way of hiding things. I don't want to see the points. I'm going to right click here, say preview, right click here, preview. Okay, so this is one example, but what can we do? The good thing about Grasshopper is that we can select the geometry, select the point, we start moving these things around, and this will follow, no? So if we can do that, then we can get all kinds of surfaces. And you can see it. So I select the line, I move them, and we will always have a surface associated with it. Does that make sense? So the question is, well, where do I want my lines? I think you probably have a side. Just imagine your side is something like a box here. You say, well, I want a line here doing something. I can either move those lines where I want them to be, moving the points, moving the points, and do something here, and then moving the points, move that point. So that could do something about it. For example, but you could also just start having your side project and creating your own lines wherever you want them to be. So let's say one here and another one here. And you delete the old ones. When you delete the old ones, they turn orange. That means that they don't have a geometry. You can insert them again. Set one geometry. And they do it automatically. Maybe it's not exactly what I want to do, but you can, oops. Notice what happens when I turn the line with a gumball. I can create those more sophisticated things that you had there as well. So it creates this curvilinear element. You could also shrink them a little bit. rotating them and do those kind of curves that you had in your example. You just need to figure out where the lines go in order to help with your particular geometry. So this will be, oops, I think a vertical one here and another one here, for example. That's pretty much some of the ones we have, no? It's rotated one, and then the other one is vertical. One vertical and this one rotated. It creates the curve, no? For example, but you could be more, this is a bit planar, so you could be more three-dimensional by just adding an extra kind of a curvilinear or angle to one of those, no? It's an issue of exploring. For example, there you will have, maybe it's an issue of taking two lines to your model and start moving them to different points.
And right now, those are made off of straight lines, but you can also do curved lines, and they'll choose from the curves, right?
Yes,
Like those all look
exactly.
Yes.
As long as it's one curve, I could do an arc, or you could do a spline. Yeah, sorry, curve. You can press here, here, and here, for example. And then you can do something like this. So now I could actually delete these two guys and insert the two curves at one geometry here and set one geometry there. It will create the thing. But now is maybe you want to rotate them and do your things, you know. So now you have another point of control, which is, you know, the spline could have many points. You can start doing really fancy stuff if you want to. Just probably what you want to do. Imagine these two curves now. I mean, I'm trying to be fitting within a particular geometry because at the end of the day, your site probably has a particular orthogonal system. But you know, you could really be very playful about how these ones work. You could do simple curves, but you could do two lines. I think most of the ones that we saw are related to lines. They're relatively simple, but you're right, you can do complex things if you just have two curves, which could be nice, no? You could even start connecting the two curves a little bit. So the end of one connects with the beginning of another one. In a tangent way, I don't know. You know, this one and that one is practically tangent. So this one comes and touches the other one, and it's like a crazy mental thing that you can do here and do very interesting stuff. Yeah, so the question is, well, we can do this in Grasshopper relatively easy. The question is, how do we take this to Revit, no? So I think that I can send you a couple of links about it. But the first thing you need to do is make sure that, you know, the thickness of the particular elements are properly set. You're going to break those into a layer. You can close Grasshopper.
And this was recorded, right?
I'm recording now. So now you have pipes there. Mm-hmm. And there's I would recommend a particular, another plugin for Revit. I can send you, which what it does is allows you to select a Rhino model and place it into Revit and assign materials and so on. But important is that you make sure that it's in a particular layer that you want it to be. You know, like because you're not probably going to have only one, you're going to have many of them if it's going to be consistent. By the way, if you want to do the vertical, it's two lines, one on top of another, it's relatively easy. Okay. And move those lines. This is trying to aim to the most complex one. Give it a name, no, like a hello, and then you know, I'm going to push this, you don't have to do that, but now you know you can actually export this element. And we've done this in the past in these three whatever classes, so you will just export it typically as SAT. But again, there's a plugin that I will send you that allows you to select the Rhino models, and they will be placed into Revit right away. Here's the tricky thing is always the 0, 0, 0. So what you want to do first in Revit, let's say I have this project, which is a different thing. You want to take it from Revit to Rhino, your site model, and create the lines in the new layers. You can call it line work. You place them where you want them. You start testing. And then you export only the results of Grasshopper. But if you do that, if you take from Revit to Rhino, the model of Rhino has the same 0, 0 coordinate. So when you export from Rhino and take it into Revit, it will share the same 0, 0. So it will go directly to where you want it to go, which is very important. So how do we take it? How do we take it to Revit, to Rhino from Revit? It's very simple. You go to the 3D view and you just export this file, export at formats, DWG. Have you exported this as DWG from Revit before? So this file, you need to be in the 3D, export, DWG. You need to see here that thing, your site, basically your project. It needs to say, this is what you're gonna be exporting, the 3D view. Something before anything, you should click on these 3 points, go to solids, and I recommend ACIS solids, because that will not create the messes. And triple check the units, because I think it's also important. For example, this project I did for something in Italy, so it's in millimeters. Your project would be probably in foot or inches, so you should be then working in those units in Rhino. Okay, what does that mean? Once you say okay and you export this, say next, and then it will export it as a name, blah, 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 DWG. You can go to Rhino and import that DWG. I recommend you pretty much lock every layer in Rhino so you don't interfere with that, and then you start creating groups of 2 lines or 2 curves. And with the Grasshopper definition, it's very simple. You just create a bunch of, you can populate your project with stuff like this, and then you take it to Revit back.
So I don't have AutoCAD either, so will I have to save, will I have to download that?
I don't think you even need to.
Okay.
Because you can export as a DWG, even though you don't have AutoCAD.
Okay.
And then import to Rhino that DWG. But if you do, I mean, you in your life, you're going to be using AutoCAD, so it's not bad to have it. And it's also out of this, so as a student, you can get it. Okay. Not little, not too much either.
No, maybe that was easy. Cool. I got it in